Let's go. I really got the feeling today that everything is going my way. Now this is what I'm talking about. Every time I see your smile, it makes me shout. Let's go! Let's go! Nothing's gonna stop us today. Get on the bus or get out the way. We're cruising with the radio on. So turn it up to 10. Here comes our favorite song. Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go!
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good dawn, good whatever, good wherever you find yourself. This is another episode of IoT Tuesday. I'm excited today because today we have our first ever guest on the show. And as you might probably be following today, we'll be talking about Azure Percept and then also the need to simplify IoT. Stick and stay with us, don't go anywhere. Let's go take our montage. We will be right back. Yep, I think I gave it away there, but well, you probably have seen on the flyer already. So, well, as we do it on the show with drum rolls and a round of applause, let's welcome our very first guest on IoT Tuesday show, Olivier. You are live on IoT show. Thank you very much for making it on the show.
Thanks for having me, Sam. How are you?
Oh, well, we're doing great. Excited to have you on the show. We've had this conversation for a while now. I think somewhere last year we started having this conversation. So for me, it's an honor to see this, materialized, and I'm excited about what we're going to be sharing today. So yeah, it's just excitement for me. How are things on your side?
Things are great. We have some sun here in Seattle area,
Mm.
and that's not common. So actually, it's not true. We had good weather recently, and things are going great. Just chilling, living the life of containment and being at home. But yeah, surviving that.
Yeah. I mean, it's the new normal now. Working from home has its own ups and downs, but we still get content going. Well, if you don't know, Olivier is actually the principal program manager at Microsoft. He's an IoT person. Runs the IoT show on Channel 9, does a lot of IoT blogging and stuff like that. And yeah, it's amazing to see him do stuff. And I kept telling myself, I need to get him on the show. And probably when I grow up, I want to be like him because he always has fun. I'm currently jealousing him because he has the Azure Percept in the corner somewhere, which we'll be talking more about. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think one of the things people want to know, especially when tech people gather, is how did you get into technology and why IoT?
So that's interesting because I don't know if I thought about this question this way, but here's my story. Like don't fall asleep, whatever. It's an interesting one. So, as a kid, I've been living in several countries. My dad
Mm,
used to be a spy. No, actually, used to be in the oil industry. So I
mm,
traveled, was born in Salvador, lived in Indonesia and Italy, and so on. And so when we came back to France to for our studies, my siblings and
mm,
I, and my parents, we actually went onto like regular curriculum, had been
mm,
doing homeschooling before, and so discovered school. And had no preference for math or physics or
mm,
chemistry or I no particular preference. I did though have a tendency to be a bit better at math and science, and so evolve in that direction. When came the time after the baccalaureate in France, I had to decide, should I go to an engineering school, and should I do software? Should I do hardware? Should I do? I didn't really know, and so I went for a school in Paris that is called the ISEP, which is the Institut Supérieur d'Électronique de Paris, which taught IT and electronics. So that way I could not go wrong. I had both, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
yeah.
I went for a major that was hard real-time systems.
Mm,
And there was a new major, and it was about learning real-time systems and real-time OSs and real-time
Yeah.
development and so on. So it was super interesting because it was a combination of hardware and software. And so ended up, graduating from the school, get a job as a software developer for real-time systems, building interesting things in telematics and other fun stuff like printing machines and this kind of things. Became an expert on Windows CE. That used to be the real-time OS for Microsoft. And after 7 years of working in industries, for several customers, I ended up being hired by Microsoft to be a developer advocate for Microsoft French subsidiary. And it was like almost 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
Did that for a couple of years, moved to the US to be the developer evangelist for Windows Embedded. So I evangelized Windows Embedded at events online with customers for 4 or 5 years. Did a little time with Microsoft Open Technologies to work on open source and open standards. And then I had to decide once again an interesting choice between going back to Windows IoT team or to the Azure IoT team. And that was 5 years ago as a new team doing cloud stuff. And I was like, me, embedded guy, real-time guy doing cloud, like,
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is. And however, I was like, that's interesting. Let me do that. And this is where the I came in my IoT experience.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
now I'm here doing things and internet stuff in the IoT group. And yeah, more recently, I've been ramping up on engaging with the communities, back to my first loves of talking to people about the technology that I love, and hearing from the people as well, from developers, from customers and others, about their experience, trying to make it better.
That's a very interesting journey. You when you mentioned the school that kind of like had the electronics, and I pretty much went through the similar journey, because I lived in
Yeah.
an area where there was like, so I was born in a joint military and police barracks, and it was like the service workshop. So you could see all this, vehicles and stuff that were probably involved in accident or had just been brought in with, so I could salvage parts and do things. The interesting thing was, for my secondary school, I did a program that had best of both worlds. Like, you did the maths, you did, the physics, and then you had to do a bit of like kind of like the engineering side of things. So that's very interesting to know. But you mentioned something about, the choice between Windows IoT and Azure IoT. Some people
Yeah.
might not be aware of that. Can you take us back, briefly, how the journey of IoT and now Azure IoT as we have it, how that evolution happened?
I think Microsoft has been following, the trends, obviously. And if like 10, 15 years ago, it was about the industry work was more about making devices connected, making them, contribute to a broader ecosystem. And that was 15 years ago. That was the very beginning of it. Um, before connected, my bad. Before connected, it was about making them smart. So bringing more software on the devices was the first step. And so at the time, it was about real-time OSs and developing software that could run resilient and that could power, these microcontrollers that would control your cars, would control your planes, would control your factory floor. And then it became, connected devices. And this is where the first step was about having a device being able to get information and being controlled remotely, right? And then came the moment where you needed to be able to manage lots of devices at scale. As soon as these devices started being connected, you needed to have things around security, around resiliency of networks. And so we ended up in that thinking about what do customers need. They're trying to connect their devices, they're using HTTP REST, and there are these protocols out there. So how about we offer a service that will allow to manage these devices remotely from the cloud? And I think it evolved really fast because I joined the team only 5 years ago. We started with one service that was the gateway for IoT devices called IoT Hub.
Yep.
And now we are at the point where we have a bunch of other things, right? For doing provisioning of devices, for bringing the intelligence of the cloud down to the devices, building these hybrid scenarios and infrastructures. Also things around, SaaS type of solutions. How do you rapidly build an IoT solutions in the cloud? Using IoT Central is a good example of that. Now we have Azure Digital Twins that goes beyond, because it's about putting together the data from things, from people, from spaces, going from connected assets to connected environments is where we're at right now. So the journey is about adding more capabilities, adding more features, adding more services as customers are growing themselves in their own journey. So that's inception, and Windows in that story has been following as well, has been evolving as well. Windows CE was the real-time OS, had to be replaced. It was actually powering Windows Phone for a long time, and there's been that reconciliation of the OSs, and so Windows has been powering that, and Windows ended up having an IoT SKU, an IoT model that is tinier, that is more optimized, comes with some features that are very interesting. The Windows IoT has been evolving as well, to the point where it is at today, which is a very nice OS for bigger type of devices, CPU class of devices out there, and comes with very interesting features these days. eFlow is a very interesting new one, which allows running Linux code on a Windows box on IoT devices, still leveraging all the goodness of Windows updates and things like that. So they've been evolving in parallel, still working very much together. It's a Microsoft IoT story. But yeah, that split 5 years ago was still not, this one Microsoft story. It was like Windows IoT on one side and this Azure IoT story was just beginning. But I think we've been reconciling all of that, and it works pretty well.
That's interesting. Yeah, so you're getting a lot of comments. We have Eric Sousa from Brazil saying greetings from Brazil. Thanks for the show. Maxwell says hi. I pizza and ice cream. Great show. Enjoying myself. Thanks guys for joining. So back to the conversation. I know before we get into the Azure Percept, that in your own words, how would you define IoT? Because I'm sure we'll be talking about IoT. Maybe someone just like, okay, I've been hearing this. Is it a buzzword like AI? Is IoT also a buzzword? How would you define it?
It is a buzzword. It is, but here's the thing. And I think it is a buzzword in a sense because it has different meanings, depending on people you talk to. And this is because there's so many technologies that come under the umbrella or that actually build up the IoT itself. IoT at a high level is the Internet of Things, which is pretty broad at the end of the day. And it's been defined for a long time as the interconnection of devices over the web. And as of today, I think IoT is taking a different meaning. It's more about the reconciliation and the gathering of different types of technologies to build end-to-end solutions that put together things, data, people, spaces, and try and make sense of all that data, extract the insights, and control that set of things, inform the users, and configures all of that in a cohesive way. So it became something that is no longer about just software engineers or hardware engineers. It became something that involves way more than just that. It involves mechanical engineers. It involves operators in factory floors. It involves the operators in a plane. It involves like pretty much the captain on the boat. The IoT solutions and applications, they integrate into broader ones, end-to-end solutions. And now it's no longer just about the little piece of software that runs on a little device or the application that collects the data and extracts information from it. It's really about gluing these various technologies, these various domains together to make sense of it. We had an interesting conversation with a customer and a partner. The customer is a company building glass bottles,
Mm-hmm.
and they have these furnaces that actually are used on a daily basis to produce these bottle glasses, and they've been using them for decades. And now they are just like, hey, we want to optimize, our use of the material,
Mm-hmm.
and for that we need to have a finer control of the heat in
Yeah.
the furnaces. Because having experts there who actually by just watching or
Watching it.
sensing, no, it's good, it's not good, it's not enough. And so they wanted to have not just the sensors, but also having the AI on top that would be able to make sense of the data of these sensors. And so they had to involve chemical engineers as well as their operators, as well as data scientists to to create the right models that would give the right insights based on the temperature information from the sensors. And that means that the solution was not just about connecting temperature sensors and displaying some data somewhere. It was very much about involving different types
Yeah.
of people around the data, around the process, around the infrastructure, to make sure that the solution was actually working and useful. And that's to me what IoT is about. It's became something that is actually way beyond just the software and hardware you can see, in some people's imagination.
Yeah, yeah. That's actually a deep insight. I like the fact that you mentioned, spaces, because a lot of people would think, okay, Internet of Things, so it's just restricted to things. But I like the way you expanded it with things, people, spaces, because now, like you're saying, digital twins, and all that. So yeah, that's a very interesting thing. So back to our topic for today. Before we get into Azure Percept, why has there been the need to simplify IoT? Is it that it's difficult?
Well, I think it's mainly because of all what I just mentioned. I think because IoT became something which is no longer just about a piece of software running on a piece of hardware,
Mm,
it became really complicated by essence, right? So
mm,
it was already not super simple to take a piece of software and make it fit in something,
yeah.
super constrained in terms of resources. That was not easy to start with. And actually, some of the dev tools that we have still today and they're used to build these software for these embedded devices, it's still not trivial to use.
Mm,
You still need to use low-level languages,
yeah.
access hardware that is very diverse. There's no real standards there for defining the registers of that and this and so on. And so it's no joke. It's not easy. So for people who've been in the embedded space now, okay, I get it. I know how to develop for that device. So it's easy for me. But now you have to also understand what's going on in terms of data, in terms
Yeah.
of storage, in terms of CPU
Yeah.
consumption in the cloud and the cloud itself, right? And because these solutions now are more and more integrated, now you have the IT people, or
Mm,
actually the app developers, or traditional web developers, or cloud developers. Now they need to integrate devices into their
yeah.
scenarios. So they need to understand the type of data. They need to understand how they interact with the device. It was like super interesting discussing
Mm,
with someone who was like planning to manage IoT devices the same way they were managing their part of PCs, on
yeah.
their network. And
Yeah.
you're just like, not going to work the same
Yeah.
way. Um, and they were just like, yeah, if I can do PCs, I can do embedded devices. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can do 200 PCs, but can you do 2,000
Thousand.
devices?
Yeah.
And it's just like, what are you talking about? And so it is complicated. It is complicated by essence, by nature. So there's a need to really simplify IoT, not in a sense of making it not as functional, not as featured, but in a sense of, we need to make it simpler for integrating, make it simpler for someone to develop a proof of concept and then go to production. Make it simpler to really take advantage of the complex technologies that are out there, to really put them to work. And the example of Percept that I took for that is interesting because it involves not just developing for a device. It involves creating models that would detect images, right, objects on an image, and that would eventually, be deployed on that device over the year in a secure way, and then implemented on that device. And so, as you'll see, the whole process can be made simple, still super powerful. But
Yeah.
you need to have a set of tools, a set of technologies that make it simpler for those who are implementing the solutions, and then also for those who are using these solutions.
Yeah, you're right. Because sometimes you get a lot of people saying, "Hey Sam, I want to get started with IoT. What do I do? Do I get an Arduino, a Raspberry Pi? Am I going to write Python? Am I going to write C?" So you clearly are right about that. And the more we can make this an easy entry level for people, the more solutions we can see. Well, now to the big one, Azure Percept.
Yeah.
What is it all about? I
Yes.
mean, tell us everything we need to know about Azure Percept, and I'm sure the questions will start flowing.
I hope so. I hope so. So Azure Percept, that's something new. That's something which is in preview. And the idea of Azure Percept, it's actually it's a combination of several things. It's a developer kit. The Azure Percept DevKit that you have here, we call it Percept DK,
Mm,
is something which is a reference implementation of a vision AI and speech intelligence solution. So what it does, it actually allows customers to not just build a proof of concept for a solution, and we'll see some examples of what type of solutions we're talking here,
awesome.
but the various modules that are available in that dev kit are actual sums or actual modules that you
Mm,
can take to production. So
mm,
you have a speech one, like with microphones over here. You have a vision one with a camera and a VPU up there. And these actually are ready for production.
mm,
They're here available in an enclosure, which is actually pretty basic, useful for proof of concepts. But you can just like take a screwdriver, remove
mm.
that module from that, put it on your own hardware, and use it there. And that's the idea behind it. The Azure Percept solution is really about simplifying the development of edge intelligence
Mm.
solutions. And offering that not just as a sample or as a dev kit that is shoot and forget type of thing. It's really about showing that reference implementation, demonstrating the best
Mm.
practices, and giving or making available the actual hardware to and software to make it happen in production when
Mm.
customers are ready for it.
Wow. So you made a point there, and from what I have seen, like you can see the board, the second technically you can see the circuit board right there on the plain metal, and it's good you mentioned that it's kind of like eliminating any black box or any magic thing you think is happening underneath it. This is just bare for you to see that look, it's just a bunch of ICs and stuff right there that we're programming. So that's interesting. I think a lot of questions come around. Well, because it's in preview, because it's just kind of like this dev kit, are we expecting different, another version of it? If I bought one now, and first of all, I mean, we'll come back to availability of how you can pre-order or buy it. If I got one now,
Yep.
would it be able to scale with maybe new hardware and stuff like that?
So the answer is yes and no. It depends on what you mean by new hardware and stuff like that. Because the idea of Azure Percept is to evolve in terms of the ecosystem. So right now you have one implementation with one specific CPU here for the main box, one
Mm-hmm.
specific VPU here for the I module, and one specific set of hardware as well for the microphones here. And so the idea here is to pick one, implement it, right, and then extend the ecosystem with other options when it comes to the modules manufacturers and so on. And at the end of the day, the evolution is going to be there. It's going to be in growing the ecosystem. The dev kit itself, is a combination of the modules plus the software and so on. You're not going to production with that. What you're going to production
Mm-hmm.
with is the modules themselves, and then you adapt them to your device.
Nice.
The
Okay.
enclosure here are open because they're not designed for a specific scenario.
Yeah.
They're not waterproof. They're not dust proof. There's going to be an ecosystem of partners building these enclosures, building different types of devices using these modules, using
Mm.
the various sums that are available in DevKit right now. So
Oh.
yes, it's going to evolve. And yes, the goal is to make it an actual production device, not just a dev kit that is here to make some services shine. It's really
Yeah.
about the SOM's really about making this edge intelligence possible and more accessible for our customers.
Awesome. So if I get you right, we're bound to see either more modules added, but also it's a base for manufacturers to say, okay, I like this thing and I want to add modules to it. Because I see a question just came in, I was like, can I connect actuators or stuff to it to aside just the audio and the video?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. The main board here, the dev kit itself, has different types of connectivity. But here's the thing: you might not want to have this form factor. You might not need to have all these connectors. There's an Ethernet connector, there's
Yeah.
USB connectors. You might not need that. When you're building your own device, you can actually start from the designs that is actually in that dev kit and build your own one, right? And you go and get the NXP chip that we have, the NXP CPU in there, use the TPM that is in there, and you build your own board based on your requirements for your device. And so can that be extended? I would say yes. That thing here is running CBL Mariner, which is a Linux-based OS, and runs Azure IoT Edge to host the various modules that I'm going to demo later on. And so it's no more than an edge device in our vocabulary. So
Yeah.
if you want to extend that, connect more hardware, you can. And you can have also the intelligence extended, because this is not something which is a black box locked down with a single set of scenarios. This is really something which can evolve. And as a matter of fact, when going back to the modules themselves, they're made in such a way that you can also think about variations when it comes to, hey, do I want that camera? Do I
Yeah.
want two of them? Do I
Yeah.
want a higher definition? Do I need color? And so you can definitely adapt, when you go to production to your needs, right? So you don't have to, you're not bound to what the dev kit offers. That's something that's going to evolve and that you will be able to adapt as a customer.
Awesome. Well, I think we've been talking too much because I see we're like, can we see some demos? Can we see them? So I think we got to the point where you can just jump into showing us what we can at least do with the skit. So over to you.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So I'm going to run through that. I don't have an actual scenario that's been actually all prepared. So let me actually bring up this little guy here. So you see the dev kit up there, and
Yep.
this is what we call the Azure Percept Studio. And so I went through a out-of-the-box experience. It's the first thing I did. So this device actually comes with a access point mode of a Wi-Fi, so you can
Yeah.
connect to the access point, and you can then set up the Wi-Fi. You can set up a connectivity to Azure. That's something that is useful because it will, from the browser, allow you to create an IoT Hub, a device identity in Azure IoT Hub, and then will allow you to connect that device based on the various scenarios you're going to deploy after. So that first time experience is very interesting. As a matter of fact, it's even more interesting because it implements a couple of features that are very common in the industry. The first one is zero-touch provisioning. So there's a partnership that's been done with the Wi-Fi Foundation, and the device implements a new spec in the Wi-Fi protocol that allows to have a real zero-touch provisioning. So we have an IoT show about that, and it's pretty impressive. Is your device comes online, it will actually declare itself to a gateway that has this, how's it called? I think it's Easy Connect feature of Wi-Fi, and it will declare itself. And that gateway, because it's enabled, will ping a backend and will say, "Hey, I have this device that just is trying to connect. Do I give it credentials?" And so the backend actually will be able, with that C, to recognize the device and say, yeah, it's a good and valid device. So you can give it credentials to your access points. And so you can go down, and then the gateway itself will give the credentials to the device. So without even having to enter an SSID and password, whatever, the device can get online. And then what Azure Percept shows is the provisioning of a device for a connectivity to an Azure service using the device provisioning service. So with the same entity as the one used for Wi-Fi, which is DPS, You are able to say that device, I want it to connect to my instance of Azure IoT Hub, and here are the credentials for it. So that way you have an experience which is very seamless. Your device comes online, gets the Wi-Fi credentials, then gets to the internet, pings at the door of Azure, identifies itself, and then gets online. All of that happens in a context that is ultra secured. The device has a TPM and uses the hardware root of trust to identify itself. So that means you can uniquely identify a device using the TPM and make sure that it is who it says it is. And so that way you can give the credentials to the device pretty safely. So that's for the first steps of provisioning that device. And then that experience of Azure Percept is really here to show you, rapidly what is possible, what you can do with that. And in here, I can see a set of demos and tutorials, sample applications and tools. I have a collection of devices. I have one device connected, which is just behind me here, that Azure Percept DK, and I have projects. So the DK itself comes with a default vision model that is deployed. And that is actually about, let me show you what it looks like. That's going to be the guy here. You'll see in the corner. It's detecting objects. So that's the default one. And detecting object means it's running a model. Not sure which one it is exactly, but it's been developed with the Azure Cognitive Services pretty simply. And now is able to recognize a bunch of objects, without having to do anything here. But let me actually change that model that is running down there, and I will show you how it's done. So I want to try one of the sample vision models.
Okay.
What I have to do there is pick the one I want to deploy and deploy it. So let me actually go for people detection. So you see here, the device detects a bunch of things.
Yeah.
I'm going to deploy that new model. And what it will do is actually load the new model on the device itself. So the model has already been trained before. And you see now, boom, it's only detecting a person, right? So that's pretty interesting. Now, let me say I want to create my own model, right? Because having the pre-baked models is something, but maybe that's not what I need. So let me actually go to create a new project, and I'm going to try and detect something new. So for example, I have this little mug here, right? That this thing doesn't know how to recognize it, okay? Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new project, and I'm going to call that Azure Percept. Let's say my keyboard works. Azure Percept mug, for example, right? Model to detect mugs. I'm going to put that in my usual resources, object detection. I'm going to optimize for accuracy. So here I'm doing work that you'll see I'm not coding anything. And what I need to do is I need to train a model. So I'm going to take pictures that then I will be able to score to train a model, right? So I'm going to take the pictures manually for now. So let me actually take a picture here, number one. I need to take about 15 of these pictures for a model to start being created. Boom, number two, number three, number four. So what I'm going to do for the sake of time is that, so you see the images that have been captured here. And then the next step would have been to go and tag these ones. So I'm going to switch to a project that are already actually prepared for that. Hopefully it's going to still work. Well, we'll see. So I have this vision project here. It's called Azure Olivier Percept Vision. That was this one. And what I can do is I can actually go and visit the custom vision website. Let me get the web page that opened somewhere else, obviously. Come back here, buddy. Okay, so let me put that up here. Doesn't like multiple screens when I'm broadcasting here. Okay, so there you go. So you see, I had a collection of images and I went on and tagged them, right? And so they're already tagged, but I can look at that closer. And the way you tag images using the custom vision service on Azure is you just bring your photos, you point at the object. There is AI already in place that detects anything because I picked the object detection type of project. But I can eventually define a zone manually and then say, oh, this is my mug, and then next. And I go and tag all my pictures like that. The more pictures you tag, the better your model. And then you train the model so that way it is actually taking all the pictures, the tagging of the pictures, and will learn to detect a mug on an image, right? So once you've done that, you're able to evaluate and deploy the project. So that one has already been evaluated. I'm going to deploy the project, and you'll see that the model is loading again. It should not detect the person anymore when it's running. So let's give it a minute for it to deploy there. Let's go. And then once it's there, hopefully it's going to start detecting my mugs versus a person.
Yeah.
And all of that has been done with that user interface that is pretty friendly and that doesn't require to code anything. However, you can also work with third parties for them to create very rich models and even richer models, or you can use open source technologies like YOLO and things like that that have models pre-trained for certain scenarios. So it seems to take a little, so we'll give it some time. Sometimes it's actually downloading the full thing from the cloud, so it can take some time. And once it's going to be there, we'll see the rest. In the meantime, like any questions are popping. I didn't monitor what's going on there, so anyone is curious about what's going on there?
Yeah, so they are asking, is this tied to the Azure Cognitive Services? Is it bundled with it, or you can, if you have like, you need to get different subscriptions? Someone is trying to understand how that works.
So it is actually in the context of the Azure Percept Studio, when you're in that process of building a proof of concept, your first application, it actually ties into cognitive services for vision and for speech. And I'll show you speech after. So it does give you a direct connection into it. So you see here, I switch from Azure Percept Studio directly to the cognitive service vision project that I created on Azure. But as I just mentioned, you can definitely consider using your own models coming from other sources than Azure. The goodness with Azure here is that you can train and retrain your models. One of the things that Azure Percept shows how to do is to retrain a model. So you can start capturing new images when you see that your model has a very low accuracy, right? You can see the scores and you can decide that, hey, it's very low in terms of accuracy here, so I need to retrain. Let me get all the images that show a low accuracy here, and then you retrain them. You retrain the model based on these new images, retag and so on, and then you redeploy over the air a new model. The same way I've been doing here, you can do that using APIs, and then that new model will be implemented in that device. And so one of the reasons you really need to think about it, as a solution is because cameras are very sensitive to the context, to the lighting, to a bunch of things. And so the same model will not work as efficiently on different cameras because they're not in the same place and not oriented the same way and so on. So it's pretty important to actually think about the way you're going to redeploy your models on devices after retraining them. So now I have this mug here, and as you can see, it was able to detect the mug.
Yeah.
And so all of that, you didn't see the training part of it because it was like the magic of like, hey, let me switch to the one working. It did take me about, let's say, 20 minutes to do the tagging of the pictures and the training of the models using cognitive services. So it was pretty fast, pretty reasonable. One thing I didn't mention here is the fact that this the whole process of deploying the modules is something that is actually leveraging Azure IoT Edge. And let me actually bring this Edge Explorer tool, the IoT Explorer tool here. And here I'm going to go to the right device. I was playing with another project just before I got online. So the Percept DK device that is here, I can go and play with it. So here I will see that I have a device twin, I have modules, identities, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is because if I look at the I module here, and I look at its module twin, for those who are not familiar with IoT Edge and so on, happy to talk more about it a bit after if you want, but definitely the topic for another longer episode, right?
Yeah.
So here, I'm not trying to find excuses to get invited again. No,
Oh no, I
it's
mean,
just,
you're always welcome on the show because we always want to learn. I mean, that's the whole reason of the show. So anytime we need to put things up for people to learn. Hey, I'm always you're always welcome back on the show. So that's not a big deal at all.
Appreciate. And so the let me actually change the camera to that one. It's gonna be nicer. You see my back, and that's not the best. So here you can see the twin of this module, and the interesting part here is that URL here. So when I wanted to have a new model deployed on my device, what I had to do using IoT Hub and IoT Edge runtime, I just had to send a new property, the new module twin for that module to indicate here is the source where you need to get that new model that's been produced in Azure in cognitive services. And then there's another aspect to it, which is at some point you can set up a configuration for enabling a higher level of security where your model will be encrypted in the cloud, deployed to your device, and decrypted before being executed. And that's something which is very interesting because IP is a critical resource for companies. And so when you have a model that's been developed that has IP in there, you don't want that to go in the wild, on the interweb. And so having the ability to secure that all the way through to the device itself, you can also leverage the TPM itself, an infrastructure that's provided with IoT Edge to run your IP, your models in a very safe environment on that device using feature. I'm trying to remember the name of that feature. There's too many of them. Gonna come back. Anyways, enclave, a secure enclave. That's the name. So that's something that really illustrates what can be done with Azure Percept. Like going from I have an idea, I want to detect objects, to in a matter of minutes having something that works. But it's not just that it works, is that you can take that and then take the same thing to production really rapidly, with the same hardware, with same modules, actually build a hardware that is adapted to your scenario a bit better. So that's the one side of the story. I wanted to show another scenario which is more about speech, because that's one that we don't see much in demos, the speech part of things. And I think it's really interesting to bring it up, right?
Sure.
So on the speech side of things, got a question?
No. So I mean, I was saying that you're right, because we don't see much of speech. Mostly we see a lot of vision stuff. So it's actually interesting to see the speech side of the demo.
Exactly. So that's why I wanted to bring that up. And so let me actually go to one of the pre-baked model, right? That way we can see that. Speech tutorials. Let me try out a voice assistant template. Let me go with, let's say, healthcare one. I've not tried that one yet. We're doing live stuff here. That's risky, right? Let me create that model. And so this actually will require, once again, resources. It will need cognitive services speech resources. So let me actually deploy that into my resource group. I'm going to prefix my projects and other resources with Olivier speech demo, for example, West US, and I'm using Lewis, and I'm going to create that. So it's going to create the resources there. It's going to take a minute. What it's doing actually, it's creating the resources on cognitive services for speech, and will allow me to define a custom keyword as well as commands. And I'll then play around with the commands on another project you'll see, but here I want to deploy something which is already a scenario that can be used. And you will see me interacting with a graphical UI, which is a web page, but you can think about the connectors, the actions being connected to real system, not just to a UI. And that's going to be the interesting part there. So I'm going to take a minute to deploy that. Curious to see if there are any questions out there. If you have any for me, Zampa, now while it's doing that.
So there's a question about how much is the kit? Where can we get it? I don't know if you can throw some light on it. Well, I mean, FYI, I think I mentioned to you, I got my pre-order in. It's actually in the States. It's actually at my brother-in-law's end. So I'm just waiting for it to be shipped in Ghana. So I'll join the lucky few.
Nice. Love it. Okay, so what's going on here is that it's deploying that solution still there. I'm not sure what the commands are that I can use in there, but you can see that in that scenario, we have a custom keyword, which is blah. I'm not saying it right now, but I will. And then you have the commands below. So I guess, there's going to be commands about lighting, about temperature on that wall, about the TV here. So let me try something and see if it works. So computer, turn the TV on. Boom.
Oh,
So here it's the TV was turned on, right? And so the
yeah.
device here has been just received a digital assistant scenario in a matter of like minutes. It has a microphone that will capture the sounds. It has a module that is running on that CPU here that is able to recognize a set of words, a keyword in particular, and then commands. And then the commands are sent out to other systems and applications. And that's leveraging the speech cognitive service up in the cloud. So that's a pretty big demo. But now, if I want to do something which is a bit more personal, if I want, for example, to go and check out my device, that's this guy here, and I want to change the keyword, the password, sorry, and the commands, right? Let me. Oh, I'm in the wrong place here. Let me go back to my speech project, and I'm going to bring up a speech project that I've been started working on. So here you see there's a command, a keyword, which is Jaden, which is different, right? So I can create a new one. Let me actually create a new one. How do you want our digital assistant to respond? Let me say, you wanna try a name, Sam, here?
I think, I think most people are, known to Jarvis, but let's try Anansi.
Nancy.
Yes.
Okay, let's see if we'll see. Nancy. That's a nice name. Or Karen, right? Could be even worse. Okay, so now we added that keyword here, and it's going to be doing a training. So that one actually, I typed the word Nancy. I indicated it was English, right? That's the language by default.
Yeah.
It's doing a training on cognitive services for that particular keyword. So I have to wait for a minute or two for that to be ready. Once it's ready, what I can do is I can assign this keyword to my device here. So that way, that Percept DK will respond to that keyword and only that, right? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the commands that are available, right? And for that, I'm going to go to that Percept, which one? I think that's this one I created earlier on, the command speech. I'm going to assign it to my device, and then I'm going to edit that, right? So let me assign it, because when I deployed that sample one, it did deploy a different set of commands that the device was supporting. Yeah. So here I'm basically bringing back my set of commands, and I'm going to open Speech Studio, which is a cognitive service interface, to allow me to configure my commands for my digital assistant. And once again, you've noticed I've not touched a line of code until now.
Yeah.
Which is sad in a way, but this is pretty powerful, because I didn't have the time to learn about creating my own models and and things like that. Okay, server's currently unavailable. Yeah, let's actually kick it in the nuts. There you go. There you go. Speech Studio is here. So I created a set of commands on the Speech Studio, and you'll see it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to create a new one after that. So here I created a command called ambient blue, and I could enter sentences to make it happen, right? Okay. And so on my device up there, I should be able to call its keyword and then the command, and that should be something like set lights to blue or something, right? So let me see if that works. Let me see. Nancy, set the lights to blue. Oh, it doesn't like Nancy. Nancy, set the lights to blue. Come on, man. Oh, you see, demos don't work. Let's
Gods
try.
of demo day. Let's try. I'm sure we can.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I missed a step, I'm sure. Is that the right one? Is it assigned to my device? Let's try again. I might not have finished that deployment. Okay. Nancy worked though.
Yeah,
Nancy, set the lights to blue. Set the lights to blue. And if that doesn't work, we'll force a new command. Oh, there you go.
oh yeah,
Worked.
there you go. Yeah.
Good. Yes. So I think I had not deployed it properly previously, or didn't wait for it to deploy. So here I have another one, which is pink. And here, the way I'm actually working these lights here, let me go back to my screen so you see what's going on. That's the one here. So what I'm doing here is I define the sentences, and I have a completion rule, and I have just one here, which is about calling a web endpoint. And I created web endpoints. And these web endpoints here right now are very simple, right?
Yep.
So let me actually copy one here. I'm going to create a new one, and that one, and I'm using
IFTT.
if the net service.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me actually that thing I did mess up the copy here. Let me create a new endpoint. I'm going to kill that, guys. Don't try to hack my system here. Let me just grab that here. I need to get a new pointer for a new event type, and I don't recall what it is. So let me actually grab that. So what I want is to turn on the little flip top panel, which is behind
Oh, okay.
the light, the Percept device here. So if I go there, I'll be able to get my URL. Okay, am I logged in? Gonna take a second. I'm not showing you, that's my secret. Okay, and why is my endpoint not? Oh, the endpoint should be something shorter. So let me say, I'm gonna call that flip dot panel. That's gonna be my endpoint name. And that endpoint is gonna be with a specific URL. And it's using a key that I'm gonna nuke just after that. And the event on, if the net is called flip dot, right? So that's the type of, that's the way you can actually define which API to call and to trigger an event there. And that's pretty much it. That's my endpoint here. And now I'm going to add a command, and that command is going to be toggle flip dot panel. Okay, create the command. And so the command actually will be something like toggle flip dot panel. Toggle flip dot panel, please. This kind of thing. So you see, you can actually enter natural language sentences to have your system trained, right? So
Yeah.
let me actually correct the capital here. Okay, so that should be enough. Let's try toggle flip dots. That's it. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm going to define what the actual completion rule is. So I'm going to add an action. I don't need a condition, but I could. I'm going to call it a web endpoint. I'm going to pick the endpoint I created for my project, flip.panel. I don't have any parameters, but I could. On success, I'm going to send a speech response, which is actually, if I had a voice response, it would talk back to me. So flip dot panel toggled. That's the response here. And on failure, I'm going to also have a response, which is failed to toggle dot panel. Done. Okay. So I'm going to save that. So that's my new command. And I'm going to train the model. And then I'm going to publish it. And the goodness here is that with speech, the recognition of the commands is done up in the cloud. So on the device itself, it will recognize the keyword. It will optimize, the commands sound has been recorded, and it will actually send it to Lewis in the cloud. And so my Lewis service now will have a new command, and I should be able to flip the panel to toggle the flip dot panel without having to do much more effort here. Should be. We'll see. Nancy, toggle the flip dot panel. See, it does something. Should turn the guy off and then back on if it works. But I might failed it. Same thing, failed. Okay, I'm going to try and redeploy the guy. Or let me actually test it. That's a good example. Let me actually go back to my screen here. And I just clicked on test because you see I'm debugging the thing in real life. So I'm going to test the thing to
Oh,
see if it
okay.
works.
Yeah. It almost looks
Right.
like,
So
the bot framework composer UI.
it is. It is the same. It is using the same in the back end, right? Sluice
Oh, okay.
is the service that does speech recognition. Let me see. Toggle flip dot panel. Let's see if I send a command, if it does anything there.
Oh.
Okay. And I can, my panel
Oh,
behind has
yeah.
been toggled. You don't see
Yeah.
it. It's right. Check stuff down there. So that means that the thing works, right? So let me actually turn it off. Toggle flip dot panel again. There you go. Okay. So that one is now off. So the goodness is that my command actually has been tested and it works. So I'm just gonna, just for the sake of
Assign
it,
it. Yeah.
reassign the set this project to my project, to my device, and we'll see what it says. If I go back to this little guy here, and I'll say, Nancy, toggle the flip dot panel. Doesn't like it.
Hmm.
Why not? Okay,
Maybe we
try
should
again.
try that again.
I don't like it not working. Try again.
Yeah.
Let me see. Let's try again. Nancy, toggle the flip dot panel. There you go.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Always second try. I guess what was going on, my guess is that I'm not waiting long enough,
Mm,
you know, for the actual project to be deployed in the cloud as well as on the device for when I assign them. But that's my guess. So you see here, I was able to really rapidly create a digital assistant that
yeah.
can control my house. That is called Nancy, and thanks to you. And there you go. Right, it was pretty straightforward and simple, and really abides by this notion of trying making things simpler. It's all about making these concepts that are very complicated simpler. But a very important thing, it's not about making people who are using them or that deploy them dumb. They need to understand what's going
Yeah.
on, but they are empowered to implement very complex scenarios, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just about things that are, super high level and super simple.
Simple. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been, an awesome session. I mean, lots of questions about where can I buy some, all that happening. So I don't know if you can throw more light about that, and then I will segue into the final piece of questioning before we wrap it up.
Yeah, so in terms of learning more about it, you can go to aka.ms/Azure Percept. You can learn more about it. It's not available in all geographies, but we'll try and get to more geographies, as time passes and goes. So you can look at if you can order it. I think the price point, depending on the places, that in the US it's $350, or the full kit, right?
Mm,
It gives you the CPU, it gives you the various modules. The modules are what's expensive actually in there. The main one, the NXP board, actually is pretty cheap in that category. Yeah, so that's the price. The availability is you can order and pre-order now. And they're coming. And once they are getting validated or approved for various geographies, various countries, you'll have access to them.
Awesome. Well, another way you can deal with that is from my side, if you have friends or relatives or family in the US, you can pre-order or they can pre-order for you. It can get into the US and then they can have it shipped to you however you want. That's the route I took, so I'm just patiently waiting for mine. Then the final
Yep.
word. So someone is asking, what would be your advice for someone who is just getting started or getting their hands dirty in IoT?
That's so I would say it really depends where your passion is at. If your passion and your interest is in tinkering with the hardware itself, get a DevKit, get a Raspberry Pi, get an M5 stack, like I have here. I have a little device here. Um, get one of these little guys, play around with them. No need to be connected to a cloud or whatever, right? You can play locally with these devices, have them turn your lights on and off and things like that. So that's a good way. You can start soldering as well. If you want to create your own boards using breadboards and so on. That's a good way of learning the electronics part of the story. But I would argue that there are tons of scenarios that are IoT related or IoT based that don't require that much tinkering with the hardware itself. Whether you go with a kit that is actually already well packaged and you work on, hey, I want to bring the intelligence of the cloud to the edge. I want to build a solution that has digital assistant capabilities as well as video, image recognition, object detection, and things like that. You can build that with something like that. You can also do the same thing with a Raspberry Pi and a camera. There's tons of open source projects out there that will help you, that will guide you. There's an interesting one called Vision on Edge. So if you search for, if you go to ak.ms/vision on edge, it's something that you'll see lots of resemblance with Percept as an overall experience. It's a project that is driven to complement Azure Percept in the story. It's more on the side of how do I go from my proof of concept to production in volume, at scale. And that one actually start with simulators eventually, or you can use, a NVIDIA Jetson Nano or other types of, or an Azure Percept as your hardware. And it will show you how to train the models, how to retrain the models in an automatic way, and how to deploy at scale using an application which is web-based, but it's provided as open source. You can then evolve it, pick the code from there, and snap it into your own solution as well. So to answer your question, depends on what you like. If you like tinkering with the hardware, with electronics, go that path. If you prefer looking at it as in, hey, this is a sensor, I want to use the data, you can definitely approach it from more of the application perspective. IoT Central is a good way to start as well, pretty fast, in building something that has dashboarding, that has easy way to control a device. These are good examples in the Microsoft realm. And then, you have tons of things out there. I was showing the little M5 stack device. It has a no-code interface for coding for the device itself, which is web-based, which is called UI Flow. And from there, you can actually attach sensors to it and start playing with it without having a need to know about coding for embedded devices. So it could be very interesting, because then you can say, hey, I have the little thing and it controls that and that. And I'm integrating to my app using the NAT or similar solution and services. And that's a good start for learning IoT.
Awesome. I see you mentioned the M5 stack. How different would that be from the Wii U terminal?
So they are, well, first, not from the same manufacturer. They have different ways of interfacing with the hardware. So the Wii U terminal, I think I have one there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Wii U terminal actually is based on a different chip. It does have the growth connectors in the back, so it allows you to connect these sensors and extend. It also has an interface at the back, right? A pin,
For the
a
Raspberry
set of
Pi.
pins that allows you to extend with other type of I would say hats, if you want. But it's different hardware at the beginning. You will program that using Arduino as a software. You can go down to the lower stacks as well. It's running for your TOS. And you can program using your usual C tools. The M5 stack, you can go from programming using the UI Flow interface. You can also leverage MicroPython directly if you want to. Bunch of ways of doing that. So there are like different devices that can do similar things. So it really depends on where your passion is at, and where, if you want to do Python on a device, or recommend M5 stack, you can do MicroPython on the Wire terminal as well. So I don't know, just pick one or get both of them.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, not too soon. I know people are like, wait, Sam, you also have one. Yes, if you've been following the IoT series, we're actually doing a series of how to set this up, use it. So yeah, we have that. Well, Olivier, thank you so much for an awesome session. Learned a lot. I'm sure we're going to be coming back to you. I have a personal question. That flip
Yeah,
thing, that
yeah,
flip thing,
flip dot.
that flip thing. I'm quite interested
So
in that.
yeah, so I knew it would raise interest there. So I just brought up my Twitter handle that you already had down there, but
Yeah,
also my blog.
yeah.
I just restarted the blog recently, so I have only got 3 posts in there, but it's gonna grow. So go check out olivierblog.com, and there's a full article on the flip dot panel there that I'm actually controlling using an Azure Sphere device, and I
Mm.
developed an Azure RTOS display driver or the flip dot panel here. All the references to the board, to the panel are on a blog post and so on. So just go check it out and tell me what you think.
Awesome. Well, the link is there. Make sure you go check his blog out. Follow him. A lot to learn. Follow. Make sure you're also following the Channel 9 IoT show. Lots and lots of
Yep.
content. Lots of people coming through the show. Olivier, once again, thank you so much for today's session. We're hoping to, have you more often to come share the goodness of what's happening in Microsoft and IoT in general. With that said, thank you very much for all of you watching us from YouTube, from Facebook, from Twitch, and Twitter. Stay safe. Let's do this again another time next week as we continue on our regular schedule. With that, I am yours truly, Samuel Adranyi, and we are out.